Hi guys, welcome back to the safety of the Liberty Bunker. The next UK general election isn't scheduled until 2024. However, it is looking increasingly difficult for Boris Johnson to hold on to the position of Prime Minister. There's quite a lot on in the world, and it's not that good for PM Johnson. Now, this is a bets exchange website. This is S Markets. So we have a bet here: UK and EU to get a trade deal by the end of 2020. Let's take a look at the odds here. So the odds, if we go down to the bottom where it says yes, you can put in a stake. So put in £100 stake, and you can see the return would be £800. The betting markets are not really confident that the UK and EU will get a trade agreement in place by the end of this year, which that essentially means that, well, at least the betting markets anyway, are predicting either a WTO Brexit or an extension. Now, my personal feelings, I don't think Boris Johnson's ever been serious, ever been committed to a WTO Brexit. If he was, there were ways. We did make previous videos about how extending beyond the 31st of October, which is the last time Boris Johnson let us down, they could have pushed for the Letwin Amendment, the Benn Act, the Letwin Amendment being unconstitutional, and they could have forced a Brexit on the 31st of October if they really wanted a WTO Brexit. However, I don't think Boris Johnson ever wanted to pursue that. So the betting markets for sure really are pricing in that there will be no trade agreement. And this makes sense. You know, Michel Barnier has tested positive, I believe now, for COVID-19. David Frost is self-isolating. I'm not too sure if he's actually tested positive yet. But both of the big players, negotiators, one from the UK, one from the European Union, both, at least for the while, self-isolate. I mean, we only have until June to ask for the extension. I mean, Boris really is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. I mean, you've got the harder line Brexiteers. I think most of the people that watch this channel roughly know where I sit on the position. The hardline Brexiteers are going to be thinking, well, what the hell? The Tories will have had over, it'll be 4.5 years if we extend at December 31st. The Tories will have no credibility at that point over Brexit. But if he does push for a WTO Brexit, obviously the Remainers are all going to say, well, this really isn't the time to do it. Coronavirus, COVID-19, Black Swan event, nobody could have seen this coming. Let's push for an extension. So this really is going to be a defining moment for Boris Johnson. Will he have the balls to pull the trigger on a WTO Brexit? Something I don't think he actually personally has ever wanted to do anyway. How I think this will play out, I think the political pressure come May or June, I mean, the body count is going to really start accelerating as we head to late May, early June, potentially 5,000, 10,000, maybe more than 10,000 people will have died by COVID-19 by the time it comes to asking for the extension in June. The political pressure really is going to be there, and people say, well, the Tories have an 80-seat majority. Well, they do have an 80-seat majority. There's 365 Tory MPs. However, how many of those are still Remainers? You know, it's quite possible you could have more than 80 Tory MPs rebel, say this really isn't the time, Black Swan, etc., etc. This isn't the time to push for a WTO hard Brexit. I think this really could put strains within the Tory party. My personal opinion, I think we'll get to late May, early June. Boris Johnson will potentially ask for a 2-year extension. Don't forget, this COVID-19 is not going away anytime soon. Probably realistically around for the next 18 months or so. Boris Johnson already said to expect at least a year, or expect around a year, of these current social distancing measures that are being put in place. So a year, American government saying about 18 months, and that kind of relies on a vaccine coming along, which is a bit of a unicorn because we don't know if there is a vaccine available for this virus at this point. So that's Brexit. Brexit isn't great for Boris Johnson. That's enough on its own to kind of rip the Tory party apart and possibly unseat Boris Johnson as Prime Minister if we see something like a vote of no confidence or being backstabbed by the Remainers, which there are still plenty Tory MP Remainers. That's why I couldn't vote Conservative in the last general election. I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to vote Conservative. I just voted for my local independent guy that had no chance of winning. It was more of a protest vote, but I couldn't bring myself to vote Tory. I don't think they're serious about Brexit, and I know this is a unique environment. We live in a unique environment. It's really is a Black Swan event. I'm not saying it's right to extend. I'm saying it's wrong to extend. You know, lives are being lost. It's a very difficult position at this time, and I don't envy Boris Johnson for the position that he's in. The next one is the coronavirus. Now, the UK government's handling of coronavirus is very interesting. It was only about a week, 10 days ago, we were being prepared for this idea of herd immunity. This has gone away now. No one's talking about herd immunity. It's only one of the boffins. I've got the YouTube video somewhere, so this did happen. I was questioning myself the other day, were we actually going for herd immunity? Because everybody around me was saying, no, there's no herd immunity. That video does exist. The boffins were promised you only 10 days ago, saying we're expecting to get 60-70% of the UK population to contract COVID-19. And at that point, we'll essentially have herd immunity. Now, the UK government aren't really communicating very well on this. We seem to have U-turned. We seem to have just locked down in the same way other countries have. I mean, even in the event of herd immunity, we probably would have locked down. But it seems like we've locked down earlier than reaping the benefits that herd immunity would open up. So there's just no communication. Are we going for herd immunity or are we not? If we are not, then the government has made huge mistakes by keeping everything open as long as it has, keeping the borders open more than anything. I'm not really talking about the lockdown. I don't think the lockdown particularly works. Look at Italy. They're in lockdown. Death rate goes up every day, faster and faster. Lockdowns don't really seem to work that well in West, at least in Western countries. In China, where you can weld someone behind their door, it probably works. In free liberal Western countries, it's a bit more difficult because we're free to an extent. Just this U-turn on the herd immunity thing. If they do U-turn and they don't pursue herd immunity, it means thousands of lives have been unnecessarily lost. We should have closed the borders much, much earlier. Look at countries like Singapore. Look at countries like Russia. I think Russia's had 1 death. Singapore have had 0 deaths. They closed the border in January. Now, I'm a pro-freedom guy. Everybody who watches these videos knows that. However, obviously hindsight's 2020. In hindsight, it would have been much, much better just to have locked the borders down but kept society open. Boris Johnson and the government have pursued this upside down policy. They left the borders open even though it was clear people were flying in from China, flying in from Italy completely unchecked, spreading COVID-19 rapidly around the country. Everything the government have done up until this point seems like they've almost wanted COVID-19 to enter the country and then spread rapidly. If you were put in a position of, okay, let's get this virus in and let's do it, spread it as rapidly as possible, you pretty much would have done everything that Boris Johnson has done. And I think no one can really see that at the moment. We're still in the depths of the crisis, but we're going to have a unique position very soon. We can look at countries like Russia and there's Singapore and South Korea and even China and sort of compare those. What have they done right and what have we done so badly? Because Russia, they're going to get their economy back on track very soon. Singapore will be on track very soon. We're going to be fighting these things for 18 months. This is potentially going to be the bankruptcy of the UK. Many things are never going to be the same again. We've surrendered a lot to to avoid closing the borders, to avoid being called racist, essentially. People say, well, you can't, why would you close the border with China? Because that's racist. It's not racist. If you have a virus spreading from one country, it makes perfect sense. Russia did it. Singapore did it. It works. It just works. So as the COVID-19 thing unfolds, we're going to start comparing what the UK's done right and what the UK's done wrong compared to other countries. Why did Russia get it so right? Why did Singapore get it so right? Boris Johnson is in a very, very difficult position. He's got 4 more years left of his government, supposedly. Will he make it through? Well, in times of crisis, people often stick with what they know. In a war, you don't generally like swapping leaders because the disruptions don't really lend themselves to like a wartime environment. So he's got that on his side. But I mean, Brexit combined with the errors made with keeping the borders open, this isn't going to be pretty. This isn't going to be pretty. My personal beliefs, I think we're potentially looking at a 2-year extension come late May, come early June, when the body count could be 10,000 plus. There's not really going to be the appetite in the political world to pursue a WTO hard Brexit. And the EU know this. The EU know they've got leverage. They don't want the UK to leave. They've got a lot of leverage now. When the body count starts stacking up, when we're cremating bodies on an industrial scale, I don't know what the hell you do with this many bodies. I don't know. But it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to go down well in the news. So potentially prepare for a 2-year Brexit extension. Could be 1 year, but 1 year doesn't really solve anything. You'll have the same problem 12 months down the road. COVID-19 will still be here. And the errors that the UK government have made, keeping the border open. I don't know. They wanted to do the politically correct thing, and maybe that was the right thing to do. Maybe that was the wrong thing to do. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. Will Boris Johnson survive the next 4 years as Prime Minister of the UK, or will he potentially be toppled? What's going to happen with Brexit? Are we looking at a 2-year extension now? Certainly the betting markets are pricing in that a trade agreement at least won't be reached. So we're looking at a WTO hard Brexit. Some of you watching this video, that's the Brexit you've always wanted. I must say WTO certainly wasn't the worst Brexit. It's clean, it's sharp, and it gets it done. Jason from Liberty Bunkers signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.